Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter, and thanks to Capcom, I was able to get my hands on Dragon's Dogma 2 early, so that I can bring you my thoughts, feelings, and advice going into the game, and how to avoid some of the issues that myself and my daughter had. I'll be blunt here, our journey was filled with highs and lows, but ultimately, after going through all 5 stages of grief over the 20% of the game that frustrates me to no end, the remaining 80% is so amazing that we love the game overall. I think a few pointers in how to approach the game will help mitigate that 20% to about 10%, which is what I hope to accomplish here. My objective in this video is not a full review, nor is it to give you an overview of the game and what content's in it, so I'm assuming you're already familiar with that. For both embargo reasons and also just spoilers, I'll be limiting my footage in this video a lot, but with self-discovery being such a main theme of what the developers were going for, I feel it's ultimately in their and your best interest to keep it that way. However, there is going to be a disconnect with the video being shown and what I'm talking about at times, so please forgive me for that. I'm also not sure going forward how I'm going to do videos because you only get one save, period. It's not that there's one save per character, it's one save per account. So I don't know how I can start a new game and take footage of stuff without completely wiping my existing save, which I certainly don't want to do, at least until I'm done with everything. So yeah, I'm going to be looping a lot of trailers because I did not know that, and I didn't take a lot of footage in the first few hours, and I don't really want to show you gameplay from mid or end game. So I want to start out with a note here about the Character Create app, which they released prior to the game's release, because this is a problem I had and I don't want you guys to have it. Inside this, they have 5 what they're calling save slots, but really what those are just 5 different palettes for you to mess with as you wait for the game to be released. The only one that you're ever going to be able to bring into the game, you have to select. So if you're on the PS5, I think it's a triangle, but you have to select that data and make sure that the Dragon's 2 Dogma logo is underneath that character when you save it. Because in the game, when you go to create your main pawn, that's the only one that will pop up. You will not get a list of all 5. You will not get to be able to back out and then redo it. You're stuck. So I spent a few hours working on Astarion here, and I wasn't able to use him, and that kind of sucked. When it comes to performance, I'm sure someone who's much better at this, someone like Digital Foundry, either is or already has a video going in depth on this, but these are the PC specs that we were playing at. We were both playing at 4K with DLSS on for maximized performance. Overall, I had a really great experience, which I think is kind of to be expected. My rig is definitely not cheap, especially here in Japan. Very expensive, but gameplay was basically 60 FPS, everything looked really great. However, I did see slowdown in towns. I think they're just too dense. Maybe it's CPU bound, I don't know. But even with my super hot CPU and my RTX 4080, still had some hiccups, so take that for what it's worth. And my daughter's computer had performance noticeably a little bit less, but still very playable and enjoyable, to the point that she didn't want to drop it to 1440p and just kept it at 4K DLSS, and we had a good time. Story-wise, this game feels very much like a re-envisioning more than a sequel. The story's unique and everything, and the characters are new, but it seems like they were giving themselves a chance to sort of do it all over again, given the budget and time that they needed. For those reasons, if you're coming into the game brand new, you'll be totally fine. And if you're coming in from experience from Dragon's Dogma 1, it'll definitely enrich your experience, and you'll feel very nostalgic as they hit many of the same beats throughout the story. The story itself is serviceable and by design pretty thin. It serves as a framework to support the major events that move the story along, and less about like a really in-depth story RPG. Dragon's Dogma has always been more about the theme than the story anyways. I really can't comment on character relationships because I didn't even know that you could give stuff to characters and get more interactions. And I'll mention this a lot in this video probably, but the game really doesn't tell you anything, for better or worse. The action and the gameplay, I'm just going to have some random footage playing on the screen right now, but needless to say, it's fantastic. It's what we loved about the first game, but it's even more boiled down. They took the vocations and they really split it off to single concepts. So the gameplay is so different. The way that you play it, the way you approach it, and we had a lot of fun with 2 of us playing side by side because there's no co-op. Me looking over and seeing how she was dealing with boss fights or just regular skirmishes, and myself, it was completely different because the way that whatever vocation you're playing, there are different ways to play that vocation, and it's just so wildly different. I think there's even more variation and experience. So I would say definitely try all the vocations to find out which one you like the most. However, the game is designed that you will probably be playing most of the vocations at some point, because they will unlock buffs that you can equip onto other ones. So if you want to have like, increased carrying weight, which I highly recommend, you want to take fighter for a few levels, unlock that augment, and then you can go back to another class and equip that and now be a thief who can carry a lot of stuff, which is really nice. That being said, and I don't want to go too much into this, but one thing that really annoyed me was the weight carrying in this game, because you can't just have on outfits for all these different vocations. You have a weight limit. So I'd finally have to go back to town, go into my inventory at an inn, take out the vocation stuff, go over and change my vocation, put on the new stuff, go back to my inventory, put that armor into inventory, and stuff like that. The game, again, for better or worse, is super manual, and I think there are definitely areas like inventory management, not being able to send stuff to your inventory, sell stuff from your inventory. That is just, frankly, I don't know why they kept it in. Even back in the day, it would have been considered a stiff game design and not very fun, and they still have it in. In 2024, I don't think a lot of that gels. So if dealing with weight management and not being able to pick up everything you find along the path is going to annoy you, then, well, prepare to be annoyed. The game does have a cool little system where you collect these golden bugs around the maps to reward exploration that will allow you to carry more, increases your weight limit, which is super cool, but it doesn't nearly come close enough to what you need to do. And you can also, of course, hire a pawn who's really big and large and can carry a lot of stuff and just sort of use them like a mule, but honestly, I think you're just at this point trying to find workarounds for a game system choice that, frankly, I don't really think makes too much sense. Anyways, I'm already getting sidetracked because there's so much to talk about when it comes to this game, but the one piece of advice I really want you guys to have is, while the world is very open and the fact that you can go anywhere and do anything at any time, the game's not stopping you. I do highly recommend that you stick to the main story progression as you get to the very first town, which is Vermund, and focus on that until the point that you get to Batal. The game already has a pretty severe teleportation and save system, which I'll get into in this video, and if you are venturing off from Vermund and you're going pretty far, you are definitely doing what the game was not expecting you to. It allows you to, but you're going to be inconvenienced. So I ended up not getting back to the main story until I was level 41, which is basically higher level than my daughter was when she got into the end game. So yeah, I had quite an adventure, and if that's your thing, then great, but that was not my intention, and there was a lot of points that I was very frustrated about as I was going through the game that, over half of them were actually resolved. If I would have just done the main story quest up until Batal, then things would have been much better. So that's my advice. We'll find out in the following weeks if there's any quests that are time sensitive. I don't think there are though, but once you get there, then I think you have more free reign to explore, and now I'll get into why. One of the reasons why it's important to stick to the vicinity of Vermund in the beginning of the game is because the game has a serious lack of port crystals, both for story reasons and probably just weird game design reasons as well, but there's basically nowhere you can fast travel to in this game. Even if you were to sell off your materials and pay that hefty fee of 10,000 gold to get a fairy stone, there really isn't anywhere to teleport back to outside Vermund. As you progress through the main story, you will get a port crystal, a single one, that you can place around Batal, which I recommend, and that'll give you sort of two bases of operation that you can go out from. You do need to consider yourself tethered to them. Towns are the only place you can change your vocation. Inventory management, a lot of quests and other stuff are circled around the towns, but there's just not teleport crystals. You would think that if the game has, I don't know, like a dozen or more locations, that half of them would have a teleport crystal. That's simply not the case. And again, I did not go to Batal right away, and I recommend focusing on main story, because the further you get out from Vermund, and if that's the only place you can go back to, then every single task or quest is going to be a very long trek, and I don't think that's what the game was expecting or wanting, and the quest system certainly isn't taking into consideration your progression. So you might get through a quest, you walk 15 minutes out from Vermund to do this one quest. When you finish it, they ask you, okay, next part I want you to do this. The game is probably giving you an objective that it's assuming that you'll go back and you'll do it later in the game when you do get to that location. Where I played it like a traditional RPG, I'm just like, okay, I will go to that location. And I went out 40 minutes all the way to get to that location and get back, only to find out that they want me to go back once more. And so I was kind of getting frustrated. So my last and most important piece of information, and I know that's funny coming in at the 10-minute mark, but this is, I needed to lay the context. The most important thing to understand of this game is the save file. So you only get one save file, and there's 2 save states. It's really hard to understand at first, but once you understand it, you can start playing around it. I wish it wasn't like this. I'll just put that out there. So the game save, there's 2 ways. You can sleep at an inn in town, which will be sort of like a hard save, I call it. It's like a backup. In most cases, you will never ever load your game from the last sleep that you did in an inn, because you'd be losing any progression that you did after that point. So while you sleep at an inn to sort of like lock it in and say, okay, here's my progression, you can't take that away from me, it's really just a backup. And what the game is more relying on is your most recent save. And that includes both auto-saving and manual saving. Unlike the first game, this game will auto-save all the time. Where I think that can be neat, for example, if you're thinking of something like Baldur's Gate 3, where like, you live with your choices. If you accidentally, betray somebody and some story stuff happens as a result of it, like that's just like living with the consequences of your choices. And, there's some cool aspects to that, but I never really felt in this game that themes were that diverse. It was more like I succeeded or I failed. And so it felt more like the game was punishing me if I failed by autosaving. It does take away the stress of managing save files, which is nice. I just don't really see that this is the type of game that really benefits from it. But that's what they chose to do. Now, I hope that they change this, but when you die in this game and you go back to your last save, whether it be manual or auto, in most cases it's going to be auto because the game autosaves so often, it does dock you. So the idea of the game is that when you go out and you get into battles, you get hit and you don't heal right away, then your max HP will slowly start to go down. Like you'll become more tired, wear and tear, right? So eventually you're only going to have like a max health of like half your bar. And at that point you need to find a camp to sleep or an inn to sleep. Now if you sleep at a camp, you'll restore all your HP, but you're not getting a new hard save, which in my mind I always want, right? Because it's like the traditional way to play an RPG. But in this game it's not like that. So you sleep at a camp, you regain all your max HP, you're ready to go out adventuring again. But you also have to keep in mind you don't have access to your inventory. So the further you get out from a town, the harder it's going to be to get back. Especially if you get ambushed and you lose your camping set, or if your main pawn dies and you no longer have a full party. It can be very difficult to get your way back to town, even running all the way and trying to escape from all the monsters. So again, we had some really unfortunate scenarios where, we were thrown somewhere in the game or went out so far that, we couldn't handle what we got ourselves into, either because of our own folly or because, like in my daughter's case, she just stepped over an invisible line she didn't realize was going to trigger guards, and they arrested her and threw her somewhere really far away from the main town. And trying to find her way back, she got pretty far out and got in trouble, and everybody in her party died. She didn't have camp sets, and she couldn't get back to town because the game auto-saved in the middle of an ambush. Again, a lot of this can be circumvented if you take my advice and you just proceed through the main story to the point where you get a port crystal and you unlock Batal. Then the point that you have to return to becomes much more reasonable. But that's the save system, so anytime you go out for an adventure, make sure that you buy a camping set or have 2 on you, like maybe one on a pawn, one on another pawn just in case it breaks. Make sure that you're all rested up, you've got enough space in your inventory to grab items, then you can go out and have an adventure. The camps are going to be great for restoring your max HP, but you are going to be pretty tethered, so the farther you get out, the harder and more, I guess, exciting or nervous it might be that you can't get back. You have to keep that in mind before you go out. Hopefully having this information up front will make it much more approachable for you, because the game is really fun. Going out and doing adventures and finding things is great fun, but with such limited options when it comes to inventory and saving and teleporting, I think that the game could do a much better job at communicating that to players. So I'm really interested to see how reviewers are going to work. I think if the reviewer is someone who is used to the, I don't want to say old school because a lot of this is just really restrictive, but the more limited game design, then I think they're more forgiving and they have a more open head as they go into it. But I think the average consumer, they could easily find themselves in some bad situations that even I did, and I wouldn't. Yeah, that would probably affect the review score quite a bit. But overall, those are my initial thoughts. I have not cleared the full game. We're in the sort of like the final part of the game. And it's a point where I really want to focus on all the vocations. There's still one I haven't unlocked even after 60 hours. I have heard that there is a new game plus and there's some other stuff to do post game, but we're having a really good time with the end game so far. So no full review from me, but I just wanted to give you guys sort of my early impressions, tell you that this was a love-hate relationship. There were, you know, a percent of the game that frustrated us to no end, to the point that I was screaming and complaining. But, you know, once we figured out that most of that would be solved by just doing the darn main story quest to a certain point, and then just keeping in mind the save system, then a lot of it was solved, and we've had much more fun since. Anyways, I hope if you guys do pick up the game that you don't fall into any pitfalls. Hopefully you'll be able to find some more tips that you can share with your friends, and we can all have fun in Dragon's Dogma 2. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy adventuring.